You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast, where it's all about education, support, and coaching for adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Zena, a late diagnosed ADHDer, here to help you unpack the challenges, frustrations, and the positive side of living with ADHD. With my no BS approach, I'll help you to better understand your unique ADHD brain and how you can work with it to feel better, increase your self-confidence, improve your relationships, and ultimately achieve your goals. Hello, my beautiful friend. Welcome back to Navigating Adult ADHD, where my voice is almost back to normal. Woohoo! At least it's a woohoo for me. My friends, I get a lot of really amazing questions from you guys, from the listeners, and I do answer a lot of those over on the Navigating Adult ADHD Instagram, which I will link to in the show notes. So I definitely recommend, if you're not already hanging out over there, I answer heaps of FAQs and share like little short videos about ADHD. However, today I have got 5 that I commonly get, which we are going to go through. And those 5 are: how do I cope with last minute change? How do I stop dopamine seeking with food? I get that one quite a lot too. How do I stop overthinking and replaying things or scenarios in my head? How do I know I'm on the right medication? And how do I parent a child who has ADHD as a parent who also has ADHD? So we're going to answer those 5. Now, we do have some episodes that relate to some of these, which I will also mention, and I'm going to link to in the show notes. But let's do it. Let's do some frequently asked questions, my friend. All right. Starting with, how do I cope with last minute change? Oh, I feel that question because I think that is a really difficult one for a lot of us, and me in particular. So I'm feeling it. I'm feeling tense just thinking about it. So when I think about last minute change, I want to paint a picture of how this can feel. So if you do imagine that you were going on a hike to a waterfall, and 5 kilometers in, or let's just say 5 miles for my American friends, if you're 5Ks in and you pass someone and you say, hey, how much further is it to that waterfall? And they say to you, you're going the wrong way. Like, the waterfall was a left out of the car park and you've gone right. That is how it can feel, that kind of weight and shock and, oh my God, no, I've just spent all this physical, mental, emotional energy. What the heck? Like, that to me is really how it can feel, okay? When we have something in mind, when we think we are doing something and we've got this plan, and it could simply be, hey, I'm going to work, right? My plan today is I'm just going to work and this is what's happening at work, right? When we've got a plan in our head of what is happening, we know mentally, emotionally, and physically what is required of us. And behind the scenes, our brain has kind of allocated our budget for the day to that activity and to the activity where we're expecting, right? That kind of rough idea that we've got. So our executive functions have also, right, got the memo. When we think about our executive functions, I think it's quite helpful to think of, say, you've got 6 different managers in your head that manage the various departments, okay? And they have been sent their assignments and they know what they have to do today. So all of that has happened, right? You've allocated your daily budget and your allowance, and you've got the memo sent out to the relevant people in your brain. And then bam, your friend texts you and says, hey, can you please stop by the supermarket on the way to the party and grab these 5 things that I need super urgent? Or it could be that you get a call to say, hey, instead of meeting at Sharon's house tonight, we're actually going to meet at Mike's now. Now, these things are seemingly innocent, okay? An innocent text message or, something that in the grand scheme of things are kind of small. However, our reaction to them is often pretty big, okay? So they're often little things like this that are changing, like little last minute change. But at the time, it doesn't feel little, okay? When we're in it, it feels really big and very intense. So I want to point out that episode number 72 is called Task Switching and 3 Ways to Improve It. And in that episode, I speak specifically to this sort of a thing. However, not so much to the last minute small changes like this, which I'm addressing now, okay? So I definitely recommend listening to that episode because I talk about things like dopamine connectors. So that is really useful in a scenario where you have time between the tasks, so you don't have to stop everything and do it, right? So if you were to get this message at 9 a.m. in the morning and you're not leaving until, say, 3 p.m. to go off and do the thing, then you've got a relevant amount of time in which a dopamine connector would be really, really helpful, okay? But to speak to a scenario which you don't have much time or much forewarning for, then the number one thing to focus on is self-regulation and self-soothing, okay? So in this case, what I would do is a few rounds of EFT tapping. Okay, again, we've got an entire podcast episode on that where I talk about the emotional freedom technique and walk you through how to tap. So you're just tapping on various meridian points on your body. I was literally doing this recently at the ADHD conference in Auckland here in New Zealand. I was doing this, I was sitting in my seat and I was just tapping away in the lead up to getting on stage to speak in front of everyone. And it just helps hugely to soothe and regulate and calm emotions. So that is exactly what I would do, okay? You can use other forms of, self-soothing and other, emotional regulation tools. But in this case, I would do the EFT tapping and then I would also do some deep breathing just to help me take the intensity out of what I'm feeling. Okay, so for example, if I'm feeling a 9 out of 10, I want to take that down to a more manageable, say 5 out of 10. And I can do that with just maybe 3 rounds of EFT tapping, which comes in just under 5 minutes for me usually. So addressing the element of emotion here is huge, my friends, because our emotions drive all of our actions. Okay, if we don't soothe and if we don't process some of the emotion, we are likely to react, okay? We might be short and sharp and snappy to our friend and send back like a snarky text message or ignore their calls. We might ruminate on it and be really mad at them, but then try to hide it and, suppress it all under the surface. We could, build up resentment and not talk about it, but we're people pleasing and overspending our mental, emotional, physical budget and then being really resentful for that. Okay, again, our emotions drive all of our actions. So addressing the emotional component here is super important. So when we can take just a couple of minutes to help ourselves to regulate and soothe, it's kind of like taking us out of the red light, out of the red zone, and, taking ourselves back down to orange, maybe even green. So it's a much better place to be acting from, and it's going to come with much less pain, for the remainder of the day, as well as later, because sometimes later when we react in this from the strong emotional place, we can experience shame or regret or, another big emotion to deal with. All right. So that's question 1. Question 2 is, how do I stop dopamine seeking with food? Firstly, you're not alone. I did that for years and sometimes it is still something that I need to navigate. So I feel ya on that one. Okay. Definitely not alone. So the first thing I want to say is, if this is something you want to address, and there's a big difference between wanting to and feeling like you should address it, okay? So if you want to address this and you decide that that's something that you're going to do, then the very first thing that needs to happen is planning ahead, okay? Because what's going to happen is, in the moment when you're seeking dopamine and you go to, say, grab a packet of chips or a chocolate bar, in that moment, you're not going to want to not have the snack, okay? In fact, your brain's going to be like, I want it, so I'm going to have it, or I need it, or I deserve it, right? Like, you're going to justify it so easily in that moment. So it's so important that you plan ahead. And by planning ahead, I mean, know when your key times of the day are that you would use you would use food as a source of dopamine. Know what those times a day are and know what your triggers are. So it might be when your medication is wearing off, and that's, say, between 6 and 9 p.m. at night. Or it might be, when you are really, really tired, it could be a mid-afternoon thing. Or it's when you're triggered by a really bad day at work or a lot of stress or anxiety. Like, what are your triggers? What are the key times that you would go for it? Okay. So then what are you going to do? Like, plan, right? What are you going to do when that happens? Now, here is what I recommend, and this is what I have done in the past. Allow yourself to want it without having it. Now, this is something that we call allowing an urge, okay? And it's very important that we're not resisting it and pretending like we don't want it. We're actually saying, hey, I really want to grab that chocolate bar right now, and I'm allowing myself to want it, and I'm not going to have it, and I acknowledge that I really, really want it, and I've got all of these feelings in my body, and I'm not actually going to have it. Okay, it's really important that we are allowing it rather than fighting it and resisting it. That's a very different sort of a scenario, right? So if I was to give you a visual, if you had, say, a kid in the back of a car who was having a tantrum, okay, allowing him to have a tantrum would be that you just say, it's okay. Yep, I can see you're not pleased, that we're not, buying your favorite candy. I can see that you're unhappy about it, and that's okay. We're driving home. Right? Versus like saying, no, you shouldn't be behaving that way and stop doing that. And rah, 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 like, reacting to it and no, like, be quiet, calm down, or I'm going to throw you out of the car or whatever. Like, which, trust me, it sounds very tempting. But like, that's the difference, is like allowing versus resisting and fighting back and trying to change things, right? It's trying to like force yourself to not want it, right? It's like, no, I do want it and I'm not going to have it, okay? I think we need an entire episode on the whole allowing an urge concept because it's huge. I used this concept when it came to, I quit drinking for a year. So I took a year off alcohol because I wasn't happy with my relationship to alcohol and what I was using it for. I'd become quite dependent on it, even though I wasn't drinking a lot, but like it was something I wasn't happy with, right? So I allowed myself to want it every evening at 5 o'clock. Like I had noticed that I really, really wanted it, and I just let myself want it. And here's the next bit, replace it with a healthier alternative. So for me, it was I would have a glass of soda in a wine glass, right? So I'd have like soda water in a wine glass, and I'd often put like fruit in it. Like I'd chop up some strawberries or get like a couple of frozen berries or something and make it all nice and fancy. So replace it with a healthier alternative. And that might just be that you grab a fidget spinner if you're bored, right? Like you have something else, or you have other healthy snacks ready to go. That's part of the planning. You've got to have it in the house. You've got to have it ready, okay? And the last thing I'll say about this is you've got to celebrate the wins. That's huge. You've got to acknowledge your progress. And when you don't give into that urge, you want to celebrate that. So sometimes I would have people like have a glass jar and they'd put like a shell or a bead or something in that glass jar every time they did this to actually acknowledge how many times they've done it and sort of have a visual representation of their progress and their success, because otherwise sometimes we can forget, right? But also not approaching it with this whole all or nothing mindset, right? If I mess up one day, then that's it, like quit, right? No, like if you mess up one day, you just start again the next day. That's okay. Consistency here is simply not quitting, okay? So again, we want to celebrate the wins when we, choose not to use food in place of, the dopamine that we're seeking, okay? All right, that was question 2. Question 3, how do I stop overthinking and replaying things in my head? My friends, again, very relatable questions today. I coach so many people on this one, and I totally get it myself. So firstly, when you notice this happening, if you notice yourself overthinking, replaying things in your head, do a brain dump, okay? And what that means is you get all of the shit in your head and you dump it out onto a piece of paper. If you don't have paper with you, you can type it all out on your phone. But we want to get everything in your head out of your head. So if you were to imagine one of those like women's handbags, those really, really big ones, right? I've got one that I use when I travel, and like it has my laptop in it and like, my water bottle and all sorts of stuff, right? I don't even know what's in there half the time. But if you were to imagine getting that bag and tipping it upside down and tipping everything out on the floor, you'd be like, whoa, didn't know that was in there. And wow, what the heck is that for? And wow, that's rubbish, right? There's so many things in there that we want to get it all out, because we have an entirely different perspective when we get things out and see them in front of us, right? Rather than swirling around in our brain and going around in circles. No, we want to get them out and, tip them all out onto a piece of paper so that we can have a look at them, right? Completely different perspective, just like the bag. Completely different perspective when you tip it out rather than stick your hand in it and try and find something. This alone is going to help to reduce some of the intensity of the emotions that are swirling around, okay? Now, if overthinking and replaying scenarios in your head is a habit, then I want to encourage you to focus on doing it less rather than stopping it completely, okay? That's a very all or nothing approach. We want to be mindful of that. When we focus on doing it less, that gives us the opportunity to celebrate the wins. We want to be celebrating ourselves when we interrupt this pattern, when we do something to change it, when we do something to support ourselves, like doing a brain dump, okay? We really want to be celebrating that and accruing those successes. And the last thing here, when it comes to overthinking, replaying things, right? That is an action that we take, right? When we're overthinking and replaying things in our head over and over, that's an action we're taking which is coming from an emotion, all right? Remember, all of our actions are driven by our emotions. What we feel determines what we do, okay? For example, when you're motivated, you do a lot of shit. When you're unmotivated, you probably procrastinate, okay? So emotional regulation is really important here because when we can identify what we're feeling, which is so much easier once we've done a brain dump, right? You might see, oh, I'm feeling really anxious, or actually I'm feeling ashamed about that thing I said, or that's why I'm replaying it, right? Or I'm feeling worried. That's why I'm going through all these different scenarios, okay? Once you can identify that emotion, then we can use some emotional regulation tools. I'll link to some episodes in the show notes, okay? To help ourselves to soothe and take the intensity out of the emotion, and again, make different decisions about what we're going to do next, okay? Question, I think we're up to 4. Question 4, how do I know that I am on the right medication? Such a good question, because that was one of the things I wanted to know early on in my journey was like, is this good? Is this not good? Is it meant to do this? How the heck do I know? How does anyone know, right? So, how do I know if I'm on the right meds? Firstly, are things getting better or worse for you? And in what ways are they better? And in what ways could they potentially be worse? It's really important to remember that medication does not take your ADHD away, okay? And meds ideally should help you with focus. They should increase your ability to function, right, to adult, shall we say, for the period of time that they are in your system. Now, stimulant-based medications are not in your system 24/7. For example, I take I'm on Vyvanse, I take my medication at 7 a.m. in the morning, most mornings, and it starts to kick in around about 8, just after 8 a.m., and then it is starting to wear off at about 4. But I would say, I still have it in my system for a couple of hours and I really notice it by about 7:30. I'm like, yeah, no, it is gone now. Okay. Now I've got like a long release? God, I can't even think of the word, right? But mine is designed to, last all day, right? Whereas some people may take a short acting and a, quick release in it. And it's just, it's going to last for 2 to 3 hours at a time. So again, stimulant-based meds are not in your system 24/7. So they are only going to be doing their thing for that period of time that they are designed for, right? So I recommend that you keep a log and keep checking in roughly every, 2 or 3 times a week, let's say, okay? Minimum once a week. But if you can try and do it a couple of times a week would be great because it just gives you a little bit more information to work with. But I appreciate, we don't remember these things, right? So we've got to set timers and, put it in our calendars and what have you to set ourselves up for that reminder. But keep a log, okay? And check in and look for patterns. And you want to do this over at least 2 months, especially for women who are having a menstrual cycle, who have got, hormones to account for, okay? Because that's going to mess some shit up. Trust me. So we want to rate things like our anxiety level, our stress level, our productivity, our mood. We want to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, right? Typically I go 1 is awful and 10 is awesome. Do it however you want, right? And then pop a couple of notes in there about anything you notice, like I was really happy this week, or I got shitload done this week. Those are the sorts of things, because I do this roughly, at the moment I do it roughly once a week. I'll kind of keep a track just for my own kind of interest to see if anything's changing. But doing that helps us to sort of see any patterns, right? Like I can really see that week before my period and the week after are way less productive, way less not way less, but they're different mood-wise, right? And they're generally less productive than the other 2 weeks of the month, right? Like I can see that noticeable now. Other things to pay attention to when you're tracking this is, how do you feel when your meds wear off? Okay, because for some people, they will say that when the meds wear off, they feel awful, like their anxiety increases hugely, or they're really negative, or they're really moody. And if that is the case, then that might not be the right med for you. It might be worth speaking to your medical professional to explore other options, okay? I've got 2 episodes on medication, number 3 and number 50. But in number 50, I talk a lot about ADHD medication in depth, and I go through a bunch of these FAQs. So I definitely would recommend you go and check that one, okay? I also recommend that you continue to work with your medical professional, whether it's your GP or it's your psychiatrist, until you're happy with what you're on, okay? Because this is a journey, and I was told in the beginning, hey, you got to allow like a year, and I would 100% agree with that. Allow a year to navigate and find the right medication. So we may need to alter our dosage. We may need to try a different form of stimulant. We may even want to try one that lasts longer throughout the day, which is what I've landed on, okay? So it is a process. And I know patience isn't always our thing. I feel you on that. But this is one thing that we really want to persist with and get right. So if you're not sure, keep asking the questions. Okay, and keep speaking with your medical professionals, and listen to those podcasts, as they will help hopefully kind of give you some guidelines, or some sort of railings, shall we say? Like I think of like the rails on the edge of a road, right, to kind of help guide you in the right direction. Right, the final question, my friends, is how do I parent a child with ADHD as a parent who has ADHD? My friends, okay, first of all, I get that this is not easy, and I just want to acknowledge that, because I co-parent 3 boys, okay? We only have them half the time, and I believe that one of them is undiagnosed ADHD, and then we have another one who has Williams syndrome, so that is another condition that is, I have likened it before to Down syndrome, because most people don't understand what it is, right? So it has neurological differences and different, like a form of disability, shall we say. So I get that this is really not an easy one, okay? I just want to say that. I just want to be really transparent, because I think that anyone who is a parent with ADHD and parenting a child with ADHD, I just think that you're doing your best, okay? If you are here and you are listening to this, if you're asking these questions, I know you are really doing your best, okay? So please remember to give yourself a pat on the back, because like we said, it's not easy, but also there is no right way of doing it, okay? I just want to put that out there too. Okay, good. All right. My number one piece of advice when it comes to parenting a child with ADHD, as somebody who has ADHD themselves, is learn emotional regulation skills. And it's a skill, meaning you've got to keep practicing, okay? So learn and continue to practice emotional regulation skills for yourself, then help your child with these. So this is where we can begin to co-regulate. So often what I will see is like when one of the boys in our house is dysregulated, right? So he's either angry or he's frustrated or he's just got like way too much energy and he's just like moving around and, you know, making lots of noise as we're trying to watch a movie together and he's being like really disruptive. Being able to co-regulate with them instead of saying, hey, calm down, or stop doing that, or, stop tantruming and just, stop making that noise and stuff like that, which is, trust me, like where my tendency to go is directed. And I'm very mindful of this. And as I said, it's something I'm working on. It is a process. It is a skill. We keep practicing. Okay. Co-regulation is where instead of saying, calm down and stop doing that, we help them to soothe, right? So we take our own self-regulated state, right? So we regulate ourselves first, then we come to them in their environment and we help them with our calm. We come into their space, we help them to calm down, we help them to soothe, we help to kind of comfort them by providing our own sense of calm and then allowing them to observe our behaviors and kind of teaching them what we're doing, right? So for example, I will do some breathing exercises sometimes with the kids, or I will talk them through what's going to happen ahead of time if I know they're likely to have an emotional explosion. Or I will do a little bit of tapping sometimes. So the EFT tapping that I do, there's like a point under the armpit, and you can kind of do that on a kid or sort of towards the back of their, like on their shoulder blade. Yeah, I'm trying to think. You can kind of just lightly tap there. Okay. So if we can help to, all of that to say, I don't think I said it in an incredibly succinct way, but whatevs. All of that to say, if we can help to regulate ourselves, then take our regulated state to our child to help them, co-regulate and teach them what we're doing and help them with that. That is huge, okay? Because emotional regulation is like the biggest challenge that we face in our relationships with anyone, whether it be a child, our own parents, our partners, our siblings, all of that, okay? So being able to self-soothe, self-regulate, and then help, demonstrate those behaviors to our child and help them with that is huge. And as I've said, it's not easy, but we can get better at it and we can continue to practice it. Like I have by no means perfected it, but like I say, we can keep going, and it definitely, like I notice already it's getting a lot better for me and for those that I help co-parent. So one other thing to speak to here is if you have a hyperactive kid, right? So a kid who perhaps is like really hyperactive, especially before bed, and like they're, moving around quite a lot. I saw this incredible video the other day, and I think it was on a TikTok, and I'd saved it, but it's gone now. So I've looked for it, but I looked everywhere, trust me. But what it was doing, this woman was showing how she had a really hyperactive daughter, and before bed, when the child didn't want to go to bed and had all of this hyperactivity and was quite defiant and resistant and all of this, was just to help them. Again, we're helping them to kind of soothe and regulate, but doing things like gentle exercises or like calm dancing with some soothing music, kind of, giving them a bit of like physical movement to help them, release their physical energy, but also calm their mind and kind of prepare them for, the sleep. So helping them work out what they've got, but also, working their, soothing their mind and their emotions at the same time. So it could be, quiet and focused craft activities. It could be just, dancing to some soothing music. This woman was like doing stretches and different exercises with her daughter, and they were just kind of moving their bodies together. So things like that can be really, really supportive as well. All right, my friends. That is it for this episode 5 FAQs. Again, if you have a question, you are always welcome to send me an email. Come over to the website, zenajones.com, and there's a contact us tab there. But otherwise, do come and hang out on Instagram, because as I have said, I answer a lot of FAQs over there, and I love doing so. All right, my friend. Huge love. Take care. I will speak to you next week. If you are loving what you're learning here on the podcast, but you still feel like your ADHD is holding you back, I can help. Using evidence-based coaching tools and my own experiences, I'll help you to manage your emotions and feel better, to increase your productivity, grow your self-confidence, and create the life that you were meant for. Visit zenajones.com/thrive and schedule an ADHD support session to get started.